listeners will know who you are, but why don't you introduce yourself and describe your sound in case anybody hasn't listened to you.
My name is Dessa, and I'm a singer and a rapper and a member of the Doomtree Collective based in Minneapolis.
Awesome. So to start out, what would you say is the difference between playing a show at South by versus playing a show anywhere else?
Man, I think in my experience so far, like the South by set is incomparable to a headliner where people are going to know that, you know, kind of who you are and they're going to be familiar with you. And then even an opener set, you know, you have an understanding generally of like what the stylistic references are of the audience. But at South by, you've got music fans, you've got other bands, you know, you've got other cats with guitars like watching your set. Who are waiting to go on or who heard your sound walking down 6th Street. And you've also got a lot of press. So it really is this sort of like hyperbolic concentration of music listeners and music industry. Yeah, it's different I think than anywhere else.
How do you work to, because you are sort of having to sell yourself here, right? Like you have to, how do you work to balance your new music and your old music? Like what, do you have go-to songs that you feel like always hit?
Yeah, I mean, not to be too semantic, but I think that any set that you're doing, you're having to sell yourself, whether it's like to convince an existing listener that they still like you, or to convince that existing listener's cousin who they brought to the show that they should like you. That said, as far as song selection, I am aware of the fact that I have a new record out and I'd like to play those songs. They're recently written, so I'm passionate about them. And also, I'd like to introduce them to people. But more than that, it feels like you read the room. So like today, I know I'm playing at 10 p.m., and it's a weekend. And it's St. Patrick's Day. This is not the day to do a song that asks a lot of patience, that has a slow build, right? This is the day to go in and go hard. So I made 2 sets before we hit stage, and then I picked which one to play based on the feeling in the room.
At the end there, did Matthew accidentally start the wrong song? Because that's something I thought I saw in your face.
That may have been what happened.
So there's a lot of very interesting, thought-provoking fashion choices here at South by. What's been the most interesting fashion choice you've seen at South by?
I know the answer to this immediately. Like every year, you know, you see some continuity between whether it's like skinny jeans, and I participate in that trend, so I'm not hating on it, or like, you know, when people started shaving the sides of their heads to when people started wearing glasses with no lenses in them. Like this year, absolutely, hands down, it's fashion surgical masks.
That's what the guys from Moniker said too.
It's because I pointed that out to them.
Have you had any crazy celebrity sightings here at South by?
I think like everybody else, I've seen either Ethan Hawke or Jeff Goldblum. You get one or the other, but infrequently do you get both. I got Ethan Hawke.
We saw Ugly God our first day. That was who we saw.
That's tight.
It was pretty cool. So Chime just came out, and along with that, you also just announced another show with the Minnesota Orchestra coming up in October. Is that going to feature songs from Chime, or is that going to be sort of similar setup to the last one?
Working with the orchestra does feel like a different magnitude of not just concert but event. You know, it's this opportunity to make a really like ambitious custom show. So that's what I'm hoping to do this year. There will be songs from Chime, the new one, but there'll also be older songs, and I'm hoping to debut some new stuff too.
Already on to new stuff, and you just came out Chime.
I haven't written it yet, so we'll see if that's real.
And you have your book coming out in September. How does the writing in your book compare to the writing of your music? Are the voices there similar, or do you feel like you have distinct voices when you write essays versus when you write music?
I think they're similar but distinct. Yeah, I mean, I think I've always been enamored with and fascinated by language. You know, so it's almost like I enjoy a really well-turned phrase or a really like clever sentence almost more than I enjoy like a really great storyline. Like I've never been as moved by plot as I am by a paragraph. So I think in both, I think there's probably like a concentration on flipping, like double meanings and images, compelling imagery. But I find it a lot easier to be funny in prose, whereas I think it's something to do with the constraint of like you're not really on the gas as far as timing. You don't get to control that variable in songwriting because there's a tempo to it here too, and the thing is only 3.5 minutes. Whereas you can make these kind of like divergences and departures in prose to go off and chase a joke, and then come back to the main plot line without missing a beat. So yeah, I'd say that's a difference.
So you said you're really enamored by language. Is there a certain line or a verse that you're proudest of on the new album?
I mean, yeah, that also feels like insanely self-celebratory to be like my favorite line on my album. That's insane. But yeah, I'm proud of some of the writing on the song from whence the album title comes. That song, Velodrome. It's tricky to write a rap song about free will and then to set that in a velodrome, which is a cyclist training track, and to not make it sound like, here I am writing a song, like to not make it sound hokey or contrived. And I think that song comes off as honest and spirited, which is how it felt to write. But that's hard to do with really like, really some kind of rarefied ideas there. And it felt really good to make it into a pop song that could hold its own.
Not gonna lie, I had to look up what a velodrome was when that song came out, and I was gonna like look on Google Trends and be like, has the search for velodrome gone up? Because I feel like I didn't know what that was.
And to be totally clear, like the only reason I knew was because I had dated a bike messenger for a while. So I just want to be like, it's not like a common word, but when he told me, I was like, wow, what a cool sounding word. And I just was sort of surprised there was a name for one of those anyway. It's like the track where cyclists train that have like those pitched bulls, Yeah, it's cool.
So what advice would you have for new artists who are coming to South by, how to make the best of their time, how to network the best possible?
It's a super good question, and I feel like it's one that I'm still refining my approach. But I would say that one of the mistakes that young artists, any artist, can make that's particularly graceless is to write people off, to say, oh, there's only 20 people here. Or you can tell when artists are checking to see what kind of badge another person has, to say, well, you don't count. People count, And right now, I'm talking to Radio K. And Radio K has been super kind for a long time to Doom Tree. But I would not be very surprised if the person who's holding the microphone works in the DC office of NPR in the next 5 years. Like, people count, and not just because they can help you, but because they came to watch you perform, so don't phone it in. And the number one thing is, like, don't be mean to the sound tech. It doesn't look good, it's not nice, and it plays like you're a spoiled little brat.
Yeah, I got to watch you, like, sort of, like, direct the sound check at the current thing like a boss. Like, you have that down to a science at this point. And
it's so easy to ask. I mean, usually it's pretty easy to ask, like, hey, what's your name, man? So that like, yo, sound guy, turn me up. What a stupid sentence to hear 18 times. If you're in the crowd, like, all you are is creating their first impression of you as a performer is this person has an enemy whose name she hasn't bothered to learn. That's a lousy first impression, Yeah.
So one of the things we've been asking all the artists is, just generally for Radio K listeners, what life advice do you have?
Life advice? Probably related to the sound tech thing, but I have been surprised and pleasantly surprised about how much and how often people really want to help nice people. I make music I'm proud of, and I'm lucky in that it's been distributed widely enough that some people really like it and they promote it to their friends because they like it. But also, there are people who don't really like my music, who say, you know what, she seems decent and she tries to be kind, and I'd like to help her. And I think that about people all the time, like, even if they're not making stuff that's exactly my lane, or it isn't exactly the kind of thing I'm gonna bump when I'm driving around, like, you seem rad and kind, and like a stand-up guy or girl, and I want to be part of that. I want to be a force that promotes that. And it's funny how much of your professional life is determined by that, and your personal life. Like, being good counts for way more than Nice guys don't finish last, man. It matters.
And so the last thing we've been asking every artist, everybody I've interviewed so far, since we're in Texas, can you give me a good yeehaw?
Oh no. Yeehaw.
I mean, that was pretty good.